So this is the deck that I used to climb to Infinite this season for the second half of the climb after I bought Hitmonkey. Now, Hitmonkey himself is a card that is best played on the final turns of games to get the most possible power. Now, remember, you're going to have 6 energy on the 6th turn of a game, generally speaking, and this will allow you to play the most cards that work with Hitmonkey. So this deck that you're seeing right here is a bounce deck, and I think that it is the best shell for Hitmonkey. I've tried Sarah Hitmonkey. I think the bounce deck is a little bit stronger. Now, Sarah is more able to be a reactive control deck, but I do think that I will have to revisit this once Kitty Pryde is re-enabled in Marvel Snap. That is a card that should work super well with Hitmonkey, but is currently disabled, and so both of these decks are going to need evolutions in the near future when she becomes a more viable option as soon as she is re-enabled. Now, let's go through the cards in the deck so you understand what role each of them is performing. Now, first up, we have the Hood. The Hood is a great target for bounce effects because he has a beneficial on reveal, creating a demon, as you can see. He creates that demon, you get him back to your hand, you negate the -2 power that he gives you. Pretty solid card for you to run. Now, next up on this list, we have Bast. I think Bast is perhaps the single most important card for any Hitmonkey deck with one exception. We'll get to that. Now, Bast not just is good with Hitmonkey, who is a 2/0, 2 energy, 0 power, giving 3 extra power, raises the baseline of the card. Bast is not just good with that. It's not just good with Mysterio, which is the other almost required card for Hitmonkey. It's not just good with Angela and Bishop, cards that want to go in decks with Hitmonkey. It's not just good with all of those cards. It's also good with Darkhawk, which is in this deck. It's good with all the 1-drops which are in this deck, especially the Hood, turning it into effectively a 2-mana 11 power play. Now, it should be pointed out here, there is an interaction that people might not be sure of, and that is when you play Bast on a Mysterio, what happens is all of the Mysterios, all 3 of them, end up having 3 power. So right now, that effectively turns Mysterio into a 2/9. Now, Mysterio is the other card that is absolutely required in your Hitmonkey decks, because Mysterio with a cost of 2 counts as playing 3 cards. So just Mysterio and Hitmonkey will get you the 4 power Mysterio, or if you basted it, it'll get you 9 power out of the Mysterio, as well as multiple procs on the Hitmonkey. You should note that it does not work the same way as something like Squirrel Girl, which creates these things as an on reveal. Each of the Mysterios counts as being played. This means they will proc Angela. This means they will proc Bishop. The whole deck is built around these types of interactions. Now, one thing that I would like to highlight as a place where the deck might evolve going further is the Darkhawk slot. Darkhawk in the deck right now is a stat stick that is pretty useful for generally just having a play that you can put a lot of power onto the board. Obviously, he has synergy with Korg. You start bouncing Korg, put more rocks in your opponent's decks. Darkhawk is usually a pretty reasonably large guy, but he is a little bit clunky, and I do wonder if there isn't something better we can be doing here, or if we actually need him. Another potential avenue for growth is Falcon, who is definitely a lot worse than Beast, but I have found that I want to keep him in the deck for now. He's worse than Beast, but he's great after a Beast, and in a pinch, you can use him to sort of juice your Hitmonkeys by getting 1-drops back to the hand, which also gives you extra procs on Bishop and on Angela if they were played in the Angela lane. I think generally he is going to be a good card. There is a question of, once Kitty Pryde comes out, how much do you need him? I think that's worth talking about as well. Now, the final card that I want to highlight as a potential change going forward is America Chavez. The reason I run America Chavez in bounce decks is because drawing so many of your cards is so bad when you draw them late. So when you look at something like Falcon or Beast, unplayable on 6. You do not play those cards on turn 6. You want to play them on previous turns when you are looking for something specific to do with them. Now, the same is true of Angela. The same is true of Bishop. Almost every card in your deck actively sucks to draw on turn 6. And moreover, these are cards that you very specifically want to be playing earlier. Again, we don't know how this will change with Kitty Pryde. Right now, this is the version that I have opted for, but I have seen plenty of successful players cutting America Chavez and just playing 12 normal cards. It's not what I want to do right now. I built this for consistency. I want to be able to consistently output power, but I do think that it is possible that that ends up changing in the future. Now, as far as other things that you could put in this deck, let's go over a couple of the options real quick. I don't think this is ever particularly likely to happen, but if you end up really wanting to beat Mirrors, Electra might honestly be a good way to do it. Now, you should be aware that she's pretty low impact outside of these situations, but the high volume of people playing Sunspot in this metagame means she often will have a reasonable target. I think this might be a level too deep, but she is absolutely worth mentioning as a card you could play in this list. Black Widow has synergy with Darkhawk and synergy with Beast, is a good disruption unit, especially if you're trying to take people off course. Remember, Shuri always wants to be playing Shuri on 4, so you are going to be able to turn off the Shuri on 4 some amount of the time by playing Black Widow into like Beast Black Widow, but not really that much of the time. It's a little touch and go in my opinion. It also has synergy with Darkhawk, but as I said, I am not super sold that Darkhawk needs to be in here after the addition of Hitmonkey. I'm interested to see where the deck evolves. If you want to go heavy on Black Widow, I think you end up looking at cutting either Chavez or Falcon. I am loath to lose either of them right now, which is why Black Widow is not in the deck for me. But I do understand why people would think that in a deck with Beast and Darkhawk, she's a card that should be in there. Mystique has been run in these bounce decks before. I know Boomer top 8'd my Best of the Besties tournament with a list similar to this before Hitmonkey came out, running Mystique and Iron Man as a sort of way to target Shuri. You can put an Iron Man in a Red Skull lane and actually plausibly win it, which is rare. Now, I do think that is definitely worth investigating in the future going forward. If we were to put Mystique and Iron Man in here, the question is, the reason I like Mystique and Iron Man would be because we have so many cheap other things that we can put in there with them, right? We can put a big Hitmonkey in an Iron Man lane and just be like, oh yeah, that wins it, right? But the typical Iron Man play style with this deck is you Iron Man on 5 and then you Mystique with some other stuff. And since you don't have enough discounts in here, you can't do something like Iron Man on 5 into Mystique, Mysterio, Hitmonkey. Like, that would be the kind of thing you'd want to do, but unfortunately that's 7 energy. So that's definitely something for this deck to figure out in the future. I definitely think it's worth examining. So if you do not have Darkhawk, I think Shang-Chi could be a reasonable unit to run instead. Alternatively, if you do not have Darkhawk, you can also just make the curve significantly lighter. Alternatively, if you don't have Darkhawk, you can try for the Iron Man thing. There's a lot of things you can try without Darkhawk, but they all have the issue of being a little pricey, right? Now, normally we wouldn't be, with the old version of this deck, we did a lot of holding Darkhawk until turn 6, so opposing Shangs wouldn't be active. With our Hitmonkey, we are no longer limited to that, and the thing with Shang that causes us issues is that we end up not being able to combine him with Hitmonkey effectively unless they are playing things that we can Shang-Chi on turn 5 a lot of the time. Now, that does happen, especially against, you guess where the Shuri thing is going, but like, that's not like the most common thing. I do think that it would be where I would start for budgetizing this, but I don't know if it's exactly where I would end up. It does have some negative synergy with Hitmonkey in that it wants to be played on turn 6, and Hitmonkey wants you playing a bunch of cards on turn 6, which makes it very difficult to play the Shang. Now, there is sort of like a dream world where you do like Shang on 4 with a Beast, then you play it again on 6. I don't think that's really reliable. That said, it is one of the options that you can take for budgetizing this deck if you don't have Darkhawk. Previously, I would have said Darkhawk is probably required for this deck, but Hitmonkey raises the ceiling of it just a little bit. Hitmonkey is also playable in Serra decks. Now, the idea here is you use the card Serra to discount a lot of your 2s into being 1s. You can play a reactive game plan with Killmonger and Shang-Chi, and you can also put a lot of points on the board with Angela, Bishop, and Hitmonkey. Now that priority is no longer such a big deal in Marvel Snap, I do think this kind of Serra deck has a real shot at competing, and it definitely didn't feel like I was out of games per se when I played this list, but it did feel a little bit clunky in the sense that, you know, this deck does let us do the thing where we go, you know, Shang-Chi and one other 2-drop and Mysterio and Hitmonkey, but only when we draw the Serra. And in the games where we don't draw the Serra, we are really pushing the limits of what is and is not playable. I'm also interested to see what happens to this archetype when Kitty Pryde comes back, because Kitty Pryde, obviously, you know, if you're playing Serra on 5, you're not bouncing a Kitty that turn. I'm not saying that's the end of the world, but again, like, there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration in a Kitty Pryde deck that this deck currently does not take into consideration. So, for example, you know, would you play Kitty on 1 and then bounce it and play it on 2 if you had an Angela? Do you save the Angela for 3 with the Kitty? Do you save the Bishop for 4 with the Kitty? And then you play a Serra on 5 and then you play all of your cards? Maybe. Or maybe you are supposed to be doing the Kitty in order to just not even bother playing the Serra. Maybe you're better off with the other shell once Kitty Pryde comes out. That's sort of the thing that I've been kicking around here, is the fact that you have to use all your energy for Serra on the Serra turns does actually feel bad, but it doesn't feel as bad as playing this deck without Serra. I think this deck gets a lot of mileage out of just being a deck with Killmonger and Shang-Chi as opposed to anything specific that Hitmonkey is doing for it. If he's filling a role here, it's just as an undercosted beater. It's definitely not a deck that is built around Hitmonkey in the same way. Now, I do think this is a completely viable way to play Hitmonkey. I don't know if it's the best Serra deck. I don't know if it's the best Hitmonkey deck, but it's definitely worth highlighting this playstyle as well. So let's talk about Hitmonkey overall as a card. As a Battle Pass card, I think this is the most worthwhile Battle Pass purchase since Zabu or MODOK. I think MODOK is a good comparison for him, but I think he's more MODOK plus, perhaps, in terms of absolute power level, whereas MODOK is more important to his own archetype, maybe? I'm not sure. Just a thought. Now, as far as buying the Battle Pass, it's always worth it in terms of value for money. Hitmonkey should push you over the edge towards buying the Battle Pass this season if you are someone who enjoys bounce decks or Serra decks, but especially bounce decks. And I will say, it's hard to play the bounce deck. It's very rewarding and very fun. I don't necessarily think it's going to be something that beats Shuri. I do think it's honestly closer to doing that than you think. Like, it puts a lot of numbers on the board. It can really get close, and right now it's still a little difficult to play against from the Shuri side because you aren't exactly sure what their range is at any given time. And the fact that Hitmonkey manages to hide ranges so well, because Hitmonkey, Mysterio, and like a bunch of free ones is such an enormous power spike that it's very hard to play against, and I do think the deck gets a lot of mileage out of that. As a card, though, he only seems to go in those archetypes. I've seen him a little bit in like the She-Hulk Sunspot pass turn 5. Maybe you played Moon Girl on 4 with a bunch of She-Hulks, and yeah, that's a thing. I don't think he takes those archetypes over the top, but I do think it's good that people are reinvestigating those archetypes because they are good, they are playable, and now that priority decks are not everywhere, you can actually rely on these turn 6 power explosions. Of course, those decks are immensely vulnerable to leech. Now, that brings me to the second part of the Hitmonkey review, which is there's a lot of stuff that beats Hitmonkey. All right, there are a lot of cards that beat Hitmonkey. I want to highlight 3 here, and just if you're worried about Hitmonkey taking over the metagame, well, don't be, because these cards exist. Card number 1 is Wave. You play Wave on 5 against a Hitmonkey bounce deck and they die. It is literally that simple. You Wave on 5 against a Hitmonkey bounce deck, and then you play your like She-Hulk Doom, and they do absolutely nothing. A lot of the turn 5s of the Hitmonkey bounce deck involve sending stuff back to your hand so you can replay it on 6 with Hitmonkey. It is a brutal blowout to do that and get waved. Now, Sandman is an obvious counter. I do think Sandman is almost not even necessary to counter Hitmonkey. Like, you could just play Wave and likely be playing a better deck than any of the Sandman decks. But if you really hate it, like, sure, yeah, go Electro into Sandman. Just shut the deck down entirely. That'll work. It'll do it. It's an Angela Bishop deck. They rely on playing a bunch of cards. This will get the job done. It's just a question of if you're going to hamstring yourself while you do so. And finally, Leech just ends the life of anyone who's trying to do big turn 6 plays. So not just the Hitmonkey bounce deck, the Hitmonkey Sarah deck, the Hitmonkey She-Hulk Moon Girl deck, like all of them eat it to Leech. Now, I worry about this coming back into the meta in a big way once Kitty Pryde is re-enabled and people can really get a feel for Thanos with Kitty Pryde, because whew, that is a deck. So I think Hitmonkey is extremely balanced, basically. As a card, I would give Hitmonkey a similar grade to MODOK. I would say, if you were to look at my latest Series 5 tier lists, he'd be a light 4, maybe a high 3. Actually, he'd be a high 3. I don't think he makes it to the 4 area just yet. He's a very strong card. He's very limited in application, but he's strong in his niche. A great season pass card. Definitely worth buying if you want to play bounce, if you want to experiment with these lower priority versions of Sarah. Although you do need Bast and Mysterio to make him work, in my humble opinion. I think that Hitmonkey is a 3-star card. I'm going to give it a strong 3. That's what I'm feeling. This is a strong 3 on the scale, which means if it costs 6,000 tokens, you wouldn't buy it, but you'd start thinking about it once you filled out the rest of them. Now, that is to say, it is one of the better season pass cards we've received recently. I think it is a significant upgrade over Nimrod, more applicable, more usable to an average player, less other cards that you kind of need to have to make it good. I think you should probably think about buying the Hitmonkey Battle Pass if you were on the fence and you wanted to make sure the card was playable and not, you know, Nimrod. So with Hitmonkey receiving probably a strong 3 out of 5, that is going to be it from me. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm KM Best. Hit those dopamine buttons for me. Have a good one.
KM Best in a snap.
Colleen Wing, huh? What about Scorpion? Guys, I'm not watching. Oh, yeah, I believe you. It's cool. I believe you, dude. All right, I found an issue, and it's that our Shang-Chi costs $1 million. One, two, I mean, I guess we can play everything but the Shang, right? And then just 50-50 it? Oh my god, wait, hold on. What if we just 1 in a million it? What if we just straight up just go like this? And then have so many zeros. Oh shit. Okay. All right, what if we don't do that? All right, you know what? Hear me out. 25 in them. This is ass. Don't make this play. Holy shit. We did it! Yes! Same, bro. But you don't know that yet. The disruption helps you give you game against you, Shuri. Does it? Does it, though? How much does it help you do that? Widow could be good in a wave. That I buy. See, the issue with Black Widow is that she's a 2-cost card with 1 power. And frankly, I don't think the Darkhawk stuff is good. I do like interacting. It's cool. Beast the Falcon. Oh, don't even Beast the Falcon. Intriguing. I feel like I'm in a fairly advantaged position here. But of course, Chavez does take that advantage away. We do have the Darkhawk Mystique thing here, which is not nothing. It is weirdly ass. I can't put anything in a bar with no name where his -2 wins it. There's the -2. There's an Angela. Yeah, the fact that he bricked himself on draws for a turn is like a really big deal, right? I think this works. Like, yeah, we got there. The Darkhawk. We just had like more big stuff on a constrained board is really what mattered, right? Like, we got more stuff onto our Angela. We got more stuff onto our Bishop. They had that weird Falcon Beast play that we were better able to deal with the Savage Lands because we drew more of the cards that had impact and less of the cards that didn't. And then he cuts this, or I say he cuts this. I say my editor cuts this, and then he doesn't actually cut it, right? This is the part where I say my editor makes a cut, and then he doesn't actually make a cut. Just 100% of the time.